All right, welcome to Be the Market Expert. And saw this article, and it was just talking about the affordability strain, and it was kind of interesting. And so, looking at this, it's comparing 2020 to 2024 data. And as we're looking at this thing, it's very interesting because when we talk about 2020, we know that we had super low interest rates, and that's what was driving a lot of stuff during the pandemic. And a lot of the times we like to compare to 2019 data, which we're going to look at a slide for that as well, because 2019 data is what we would consider more of a normal market, right? We haven't had a normal market in many, many years, right? If we were to look at this, we had 2020, we had COVID. 2021, we had super low interest rates. 2022, the interest rates started off low and then they skyrocketed super quickly. Like the fastest we ever saw interest rates ever go up as a nation. Then we got into 2023 where we had very, very high interest rates, and they stayed very elevated the entire year. And then 2024 has been super odd, right? We had very high interest rates. Then we had that 50 basis point drop, right, from the Fed, which didn't directly correlate to interest rates going lower, but they were lower at that point. And yet we're actually seeing interest rates go back up because of just things that are happening inside of the current market that we're in as far as inflation. So here we go. We're looking at 2020 data. It says US median home price. Cool. So we got to keep in mind median, what they're doing is they're going through and they are looking at the most expensive home versus the cheapest home, and they're just whittling it down. Well, that median home price, $65,000 in 2020. Then we got to fast forward to 2024, and this is looking at August, so we are putting a couple months in between a lot of different things, but 85,000. Again, median number is the highest and the lowest, and we whittle it down till we get to the middle, $85,000. Well, we know in the state of Colorado, we are probably on the opposite end of the spectrum. We're the ones getting whittled out till they get to the middle. All right. So there's no home in Colorado at a median level for $85,000. This is not us by any extent of the imagination, but yet it still goes through and it does show this increase. Then what we have to talk about is the income to actually afford a home. And that's where it gets interesting. Because when we're talking about 2020 and the interest rates being, I'm going to say it, let's call it free. Like money was free in the grand scheme of things back in 2020, 2021. And so the qualified income that you actually had to have to be able to afford that median home was $64,000. With interest rates being so elevated, as well as the price of homes going up, to be able to afford the median level home in the United States, you have to have $120,000. And so when we look at this thing, obviously we know that this isn't a real world when we're talking about Colorado, because in Colorado you would actually probably have to have a dual income to be able to afford a home in Colorado at our median levels. So you're really talking about someone, a household making somewhere around $200,000, because we do have a lot of dual income families, right, where we both have both spouses that are working, and you probably have a spouse that's probably somewhere around that $100,000 mark, and probably another spouse that's somewhere around, $60,000. I think is pretty much the general makeup of most residential houses where we're talking about dual income. And yet this does show the difference. And here's just your visual representation of this thing. So look at the disparity here, right? Like we're looking here and it says this is the Fed's information that the Fed brought it in here. And it says for the metric estimates, the household income needed to afford a median price US home without spending more than 30% of the annual income. And it says, in simple terms, it represents the income level to afford a typical US home. And we know this, right? When we're talking about conforming loans, we know that they're actually looking for lower than 30%, right? When we're talking about your debt to income ratio, your PITI, all those different things, we're talking about less than 30%. So here we are. Here's your median home in the United States. Again, we're in a skewed state because we live in one of the most expensive states in the nation. and then the qualified income. And we can just see this disparity here where we were going through and it was pretty level, like all the way across, pretty level information here. And to where it was just like, cool, you go out and you get what you're supposed to be getting to get paid, and you're going to be able to afford a home. And now we've changed this drastically where you actually have to make way more money because values have gone up and interest rates are elevated as well. And that's what's kind of messing with these things. So it says increase in income needed to keep up with the rising cost of home ownership, 29%. And I would say that probably that 29% is probably relative all the way across the board, right? That number is probably pretty safe if you were to say, versus, Colorado, right? Well, we know that the median price in Colorado is a lot different than it is in the nation, yet you could probably be pretty safe that says on average, or the median is 29% increase. And then it says 86.6% during the pandemic housing boom. We saw housing demand surge rapidly aimed ultra low rates, the stimulus, remote work boom, right? We had a lot of people move to the panhandle. We had a lot of people move to Texas. We had a lot of people move to Florida. We had these huge states that could take a lot of people, and they moved. It says new construction would have had to increase roughly 300% to absorb the pandemic era surge in demand. Unlike the housing market, housing supply isn't as elastic and you can't quickly ramp it up. And we can't, right? Like we've been living in this world with very, very limited inventory. And now the inventory is starting to rise, right? Inventory is starting to go up across the board and across the nation. And we're one of the states where our inventory levels are getting closer to 2019. We're going to look at that slide here in a minute. But if we're looking at this thing, California, Texas, Florida, some of the biggest states. And while there's more, I think, outflux of people inside of California right now, Texas and Florida, on the other hand, had a lot of people moving into their states. And a lot of it has to do with affordability. But yet, what we're seeing now is they have a lot more inventory on the board. So if we were to look at just another one real quick, this is interesting, and this will have an impact on us, right? This is the hurricane damage from Helene and Milton that happened this year. This is something that's going to have a direct impact on insurance nationwide. And so, as we're looking at this thing, we go through. Let's just jump right into this visual representation. We're on the low side, the estimates. They're going through and they're saying $40 billion, right? And so that $40 billion is from Milton and $31 billion from Helene. All right. Then when we jump to this other side, they're saying for the high side, 70 billion for Milton and 49 billion for Helene. Billions of dollars of real estate has been impacted, right? So we're going anywhere from 71 billion in totality to 119 billion dollars in property damage. Now, that's both commercial and residential, and yet most of the time, yes, there's going to be some people that have been impacted that did not have insurance. That very real. There's going to be some insurance policies that aren't going to pay out because they didn't have the right insurance. Yet, what we have to know is that most of this is going to go through insurance. And so when it's going to go through insurance, what it's going to do is they're going to put it across policies nationwide to be able to recoup some of that money, because they're not going to be able to recoup all that money out in Florida. So they're not going to astronomically increase Florida's rates. I mean, they will. They're going to, because stuff like this keeps happening. They're going to raise rates, but they're going to put it across the board, right? We had fires in Colorado. During these hurricanes, I believe there's a monstrous fire out in Wyoming. Like there is a lot of stuff that is actually happening where we're going to see higher interest rates, which is directly going to impact housing, right? When we're going through and we're looking at, can I go buy a house? Is it in an area that is impacted by natural disasters? Then there's going to have to be some conversations that we're going to have going forward, because there's going to be some people that can't afford a home because they can't get insurance on it. And so we're going to see this. We're also going to see some of these houses that, because of these areas that they live in with these natural disasters, that the home values are probably going to come down. And these home values are probably going to come down because if you can't get insurance on it, and there's going to be less of a population of people that can buy in these areas. And so that's where we also see stuff start impacting, right? So think of it in these terms. Think about these senior living communities, right? These 55 plus, these 60 plus, these living communities. And if you were to look at it, if you were to go in the MLS right now and you were to go jump in and go look at this, keep in mind that demographic of people is very, very low. And so when you go and you look at that demographic, because they're cutting out all the millennials, they're cutting out Gen Z, they're cutting out a lot of different people to be able to afford that house or to be able to qualify for that house, that there's a less of a population going for it. So their prices are generally lower. Same effect's going to happen here. If you can't get insurance in an area because they're too high, and to where insurance companies are just like, hey, look, we're not insuring these areas anymore. Like we can't recoup our cost. It is not worth us to be in this area, and they start getting out. And then maybe the state or some kind of private companies start jumping in. What we're going to see is these values start going down, which is going to impact a lot of these areas. So our insurance obviously is going to go up. It's going to impact home ownership in the future. And yet we don't know what the true aftermath of this looks like and what the true devastation is, except for in the terms of dollars, from anywhere from 71 to 100 and 19 or 100, yeah, $119 billion. So then this was interesting. So which metros are seeing a surge of home sellers? All right, so there's your headline. If you were to look at this thing, here's just inventory, right? Which we jump into when we look at the next report, right? And so here we are, 2024. We'll look at that here in the next report. But then if we were to look at weekly new listings unsold, and that's where we have to keep in mind where a lot of this data comes from, and they're calling it out unsold data because that's actually the easier numbers to look through. When we're talking about, 2020, 2021, when homes were, selling in a couple minutes, right? That's like the general perception that a lot of people have, especially home sellers right now, where homes are flying off the shelf and they weren't lasting the weekend. Well, we also don't have a lot of that data because it's very hard to actually pull it off the MLS if it's very, very quick, right? That's why we don't have any data for new builds and stuff where it actually has to hit the MLS, or actually we have zero visibility into it. Well, if we were to look at this thing, here's 2024, like we are right in this middle area of things that's going on for November. And when we jump into it a little bit deeper, here are the metros seeing a surge in sellers. So these are listed properties. What's interesting is we're basing this off of 2019 data. All right. So this is 2019 data, and I just broke it. There we go. And as we're looking at this thing, what we can do is we can actually go through and we can see, new listings, percent changes. And when we see the negatives, right? So we're going through and we're seeing like these are the places that actually have way less inventory. And we've talked about this, right? When we're talking about like the Northeast right now, that's where people are running to. They're not flocking to Florida anymore. They're not running to Texas. They're not running to those panhandle states. What they're doing though is they're going to the northeastern parts of the United States. So we can see this where we're going through 42% less inventory when we're in Maryland, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Delaware, Wisconsin's lower, Maryland, Ohio, right? Like these are going through some of the cities. Now, if we were to keep going over, let's advance it because this is kind of probably what we care about a little bit more. Here's us. Here's Denver, Aurora, Broomfield. And we have only 8% less inventory today than what we did in 2019. So what this is saying is we're getting a lot more opportunity for buyers, right? Homes are actually sitting on the market a little bit longer. For those that were on Coffee Talk with us on Monday, we actually heard agents that have had properties sitting on the market way longer than they expected to have these homes on the market for. And so as we're going through, what we have to realize is that firstly, there's opportunity as a buyer's agent. And what we know is the biggest issue that most people are having is this affordability, and they're getting around this interest rate. And we have these mechanisms that we know that we could pull right now because of what is happening inside of how we're negotiating contracts, right? And contracts are way more negotiable today than they've ever been, right? Like you're writing your compensation into contracts now. Like, you've never been allowed to do that. You actually have the right to write what you are getting paid. We're going through, we're asking for concessions. We're doing a lot of stuff pre-inspection now. And so when you're seeing this and we're saying like, oh my goodness, so like we're looking at this thing, we have 8% less inventory than what we did in 2019, which also means that inventory is rising. That's what this is saying to me. Inventory is going up. There's more options. What this also means on the sell side is that when we're having that consultation, when we're at that dining room table, we need to be making sure that we're looking at what is currently on the board in the MLS when we're talking to our home sellers, because they have a lot more competition today than they've had in the last 4 years, right? When we're going through and we're looking at this thing and we're talking to them and we're seeing how many homes are on the street, how many homes are in the neighborhood, how many homes in the general vicinity look like theirs, and we have to be looking at how many days they've been sitting on the market. If we're doing the enemy test, right, we're saying awesome, so we're comparing 3 bedrooms to 2 bathrooms. We're going through and we're looking at the overall condition of the home. We're looking at how many days the home has sat on the market. And we need to be helping our clients make the decisions. We need to be knowing what is their motivating factor for selling their house, right? Is it that they're looking for the most amount of money, which all of them are, but yet there has to be something else. Like, they're not just selling their house because they want to cash out for the most part. And so, like, why did you contact me? What's important about selling your house? What is your timeline? When do you need to be there? And here is the strategy. Here are 6 other homes that have sat on the market for over 120 days. Here are their price points. Here are the conditions that they're sitting in. This is the strategy that I would like to employ to get your home sold for the quickest amount of time for the most amount of money that your home commands, right? Like, these are the conversations that we need to have. And so this is very interesting data. Like, we're looking at this thing, and yes, the rest of this stuff, here we are. Florida. Yeah, there's Oklahoma, but let's start getting to these bigger ones. South Carolina, Texas, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Oklahoma. We're seeing a lot of the panhandle. When people were moving to have more space, bigger homes, it was cheaper homes. These are the states that actually have a lot of inventory. Yes, there was a lot of builders building, and there was a lot of people that are getting called back to work, right? Like, there's a lot of people where like the remote work is kind of disappearing. And so we're actually seeing that these people actually have more, way more inventory. South Carolina, 53% more inventory than they had in 2019, what we would consider a normal market. And so with these things going up, this isn't a bad thing. We just have to be making sure that we're having conversations and that we are educating our consumers, both the buy side and the sell side, going forward about what extra inventory, with the rates being what they are, knowing the different incentives that we can offer to get more eyes and to get more offers on properties and to help our clients win. And so let's jump into Logan Motoshami's report that he does every Friday for us. And so this is rear view facing data. And he starts it off and he says, we have had 3 weeks of positive year-over-year growth in both purchase application data and weekly pending contract. I think this is probably going to dry up. I can't imagine this continues to go up. Just because interest rates are a little bit higher at this point. Now, we could be still seeing benefit from the Fed talking about 50 basis points, and that's still maybe in some people's heads, but it's up to us to be going through and making sure that we know what mechanisms, buy downs, right? Lender incentives, like, there's all these different components that are going into taking interest rates down. So we have to be able to know what some of those things are. And saying last year at this time, mortgage rates were heading towards 8%. We're not at 8% anymore. We're closer back to, again, 7%. We were low sixes. Now we're back to high sixes. And yet this is what it looks like. So if we're going through here, this is interesting, right? Here's 2024. We're basing this off of 2023 and 2022 data. And you can see, guys, this is seasonality. This is typical seasonality right here. If we were to look here, we got October, November, December. Real estate agents go to sleep as jack-o'-lanterns, wake up as Easter bunnies. Like, that has historically been how real estate operates. Yet, because of interest rates, because of the cost of money, because of the compression that we've had on sales, because of those components, we can actually see that we actually had this uptick in houses going through, and a lot of it is interest rate driven. And I think that a lot of it has to do with, that that all the information that came around the Fed about the 50 basis points, right? It was everywhere. And so people interpreted that data the way that they want to interpret it. They raised their hand and they started talking to their lenders. So here's your home pending sales. It's trending up, which is good. We're seeing more houses. Purchase application data. Well, here we are. We are going back down. And again, we're going back down because of interest rates are going higher. But yeah, look at this. We're still higher than 2023. 2022, we saw this big dip right here because again, like it was getting really weird. Seasonality, higher interest rates did make this go the way that it went. But here we are. We are higher than 2023. This is great, great news, right? As we're thinking about this, this means people are getting off the sidelines. We can only sit on the sidelines for so long. A big piece of what has been happening inside of our industry is people believe that 2 and 3% interest rates are normal, even though that it was only for about a year. And that we're going through, and a lot of people were thinking that we were in this bubble, right? Okay, home prices were super inflated. We were in a bubble. There's going to be a crash, right? Then people would say, okay, well, it's going to come from Airbnbs, right? Like there's too many Airbnbs, and so those people are going to have to sell at a loss. Then they were like, you know what, baby boomers, they're coming of age and they're all going to have to sell their house because they're all about to die, right? That's a silver tsunami, right? Like that was a theory that was out there. And so all these theories were going around about how come there's going to be so much inventory hitting. We'll be thinking about that. Like, I want you guys to really think about, especially the silver tsunami, because that's the only one, while none of them makes sense, that's the only one that I could even like get my head around is that there's so many baby boomers with so much real estate. How quickly would they all have to like die at the exact same time for there to be a flood of inventory? Like in all reality, like that's what these people are but basing this off of is like we're gonna have this influx of inventory because all these people are gonna die, and like they would have to all die in like the same day, same week, same month for this to just be astronomical, which is not real. So we're going through, we're seeing purchase application data still higher, but it is starting to trend down because interest rates are starting to go up. But here's what we're going through, and we're looking at the the 10-year yields, we're looking at the mortgage spreads, which isn't something we're going to really talk about. But again, here's this inventory. We're seeing more people raise their hand looking to sell their house. And what we have to know as real estate agents is historically speaking, home sellers become home buyers. So we have 33% more inventory on the market. And while we're not going to say it's one for one, it's pretty close. Yes, there could be people selling investment properties. There could be people selling their vacation rental. Sure, absolutely. But what I would say here is that there's probably people that are also selling their house that are buying a home. And while they might be going to a cheaper place to live, us as real estate agents, what we know is that while we can sell their house, we also can get a referral partner. So if we look at the inventory change, right? So we're talking about the 11th to the 18th, again, rear view facing data. It went from 732 to 739. So inventory is going up in a time that is historically speaking that we are in a seasonal market and homes aren't coming on the market. And so when we were having conversations, I even heard some of my clients the other day, they were talking to, I don't know, somebody that's a real estate agent or knows real estate. I don't know, something. Everyone's an expert. But they were going through and they were saying that, oh yeah, so-and-so was saying, to relist in the spring. And I'm thinking to myself, I get that. But that's like a 2019 strategy, right? Like 2019, I get it. We're going to list the house on Thursday. We're going to lock the doors until Saturday. We're going to have a massive open house. And if we don't have any traction in the winter months, then we're going to take it off the market and we're going to throw it in the spring. That's not what's driving consumers right now. Consumers are not driven by seasonality at this point. They're driven by how much is my home payment going to be? And does this home make sense? Because people are looking to live in their home longer, right? People aren't looking at this thing because they're going to be trading up. Remember, like for those that were in real estate in like 2021, people were literally moving across the street. They were like, hey, I actually want a different view from my window. Like literally that was happening. And we're not seeing that anymore. Now people are making these decisions based off of, will this meet my family's needs for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Can I retire here? Like with the cost of money being what the cost of money is, People are making decisions based off of the home functionality for a longer period of time. And if we were to look at this over the same time last year, we can see it went from 546 to 554. So we have almost 200,000 more homes than what we did in last year. It says the all-time inventory bottom of 2022 was 240,000. While if we were to look at our peak in 2024, well, that was what we had last week, 739,434 total homes in the United States. And if we were to look at 2015, because we like to look pre-2019 for any kind of normal market, 1.1 million homes. So here we are. We're sitting right here in the middle. We want more homes. More homes puts us in a balanced market. That means that our buyers have more homes to look at. We also know that sellers, historically speaking, become buyers. And so even though they won't be getting 3, 4 offers on their house in most situations, then that means that when they do go to sell their house, they're going to have options to go buy a house. And we're not in this unhealthy market where we are in a bidding situation. I mean, be thinking about this. Like, this isn't how real estate historically goes. There are auction style websites that you can put your house on and see, what you get. But most people don't get into real estate to go buy a house thinking they're going to enter into an auction style setting, right? Like, people will like, hey, they listed their home for this. This is what they're expecting to get. This is what I value the home, and we have a negotiation. 2021 broke that, right? 2021 went through and we had this auction house mentality to where it was, I got 20 offers, bring me your best offer. Don't put any escalation clause because we're not going to play with this. We just want the most amount of money. Also, waive contingencies and anything else that can make the offer more attractive. So this is good. We want more inventory. We want to get up here into this 2019, 2018, 2017 level because more options is better for all of us. It also gets kind of weird because we can also see this with some of the homes that are sitting on the market right now. Think about where we wanted to be again a few years back. You wanted a bunch of listings, right? Like, you were excited to have listings. Now, it might be in a place where you actually want more buyers, right? Like, we start getting to a more balanced market. Yes, you still want some listings, but then you also have to be thinking about what your holding costs are, right? You have to be thinking about what it's costing you to stage the house. You also have to be thinking about your commitments that you're doing. Are you the person that's going to go through and host an open house every weekend until the house sells? Like, you're going to have to start changing your strategies, knowing that houses aren't selling in a weekend anymore, selling in a month. If homes are taking 4, 5, 6 months to sell, which is what starts to happen in these balanced markets, your strategies need to change, right? Like, we're going through and we have to say, okay, cool. Like, I'm going to hold this house, but am I really going to stage it? Or am I going to do a consult and just take their stuff and position it better? Am I going to consult them that they actually need to add paint? Right. And so we're going to have more difficult conversations. So be thinking about that. Like, as you're going through, are you comfortable telling your seller at the dining room table that not only do they need to declutter this room, but they also need to paint it? That this kitchen of theirs, yes, but if they're wanting to get more eyes, the other 3 kitchens in the neighborhood, well, they've all been rehabbed. They've been updated. And so they're going to have to remove the tile countertop, right? Like, those are the conversations that as inventory starts to rise, yes, it's a better environment for all of us to plan, yet we have to have better conversations going forward with our consumers to set expectations. We go through and we look national single family new listings. Guys, look at this. There is more than there's been in 2022 and 2023. We have more inventory. There's more inventory today, nationally speaking. Yes, California, Texas, Florida skews those numbers. They are hugely populated places. They have a lot of people. And yet, we're also one of those places, right? We are getting more inventory coming in versus 2023 or versus 2019. Like, we are getting very, very close. Price cut percentages, we know that 1/3 of all homes take a price cut every year. As a nation, we're sitting at 39.5%. Again, we need to sit down at the dining room table and have the conversation with our sellers to set expectations of their home. Yes, we can't look at Zillow from 2021, right? We need to be looking at houses that have sold in the last 30 days, right? Like in all reality, we shouldn't be going back 90 days anymore, unless it's in a neighborhood where nothing turns over. We shouldn't be going back that far. We should be looking at 30 days. Here's what it looks like, because interest rates have changed a lot, right? We got different things that are happening. 30 days snapshot. Here's how many homes are still in the market. This is how long they've sat on the market. This is how many homes are pending. This is how long they sat on the market. This is how many homes are under contract, sold, everything, going through all that data, because you don't want to be at 40%. We're going to look at Arvada next. I don't even know what it is, but I could put money on it. It's going to be higher. I bet it's closer to 50%. And so when we're going through this, and I remember a time, and looking on the call while Kim's face isn't showing, I know that she could speak to this as well. Guys, there was a time when you actually had to go tell your seller how many price cuts you took, right? When you would be getting interviewed by a seller, they would say, "Oh, how many price cuts do you typically have? Like, what is your average list to sell price?" Like when you're interviewing for jobs, like that was a thing, and we kind of got out of that because homes were selling for way over. We were blessed in that sense, at least far as that goes. But as we're going through, you're gonna go ahead, Kim.
No, when I go on a listing appointment, I go over all of that with them, especially over the last probably 3 months. How many of them
Yeah,
have decreased it, how long they've been on the market, time in between reducing the
absolutely.
price.
What about for your own sales? Like, are you showing them kind of what you're doing?
Um, I've actually had one that really skewed my numbers because of that horrible sewer smell.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so no, I haven't been. I just go off of all of the other people's numbers around the listings.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you that we have a set of agents that truly do compete in a geographical farm, and you guys may know who they are. And yet, every time that they go up against multiple agents, like that's one of the things that we do. Like we actually pull the numbers for all the agents. We look at how many homes they've sold, how many homes they sold in the neighborhood. We look at their average sales price, their average list price, how many price cuts they've taken, and that's some of the things that they actually go to the listing appointment with, and actually showcase those numbers for why they are the people for the job. And so as we're going through, guys, and we're sitting in these markets where homes are sitting for a little bit longer, it's going to be imperative that we have the difficult conversation around what the list price should be versus what they would like it to be. Because again, like you're going to be having to go up and compete against your own numbers at some point. So it's going through. It says the week ahead. So this is this week. It says this week we will have more speeches by Fed presidents plus existing home and new sales data. Remember that the recent housing stats data and our starts data and this week's existing and new home sales reports won't account for recent higher mortgages. Again, everything that we do is rear view facing data. So if we look through and we're like, oh yeah, there's a lot of houses starting to sell. Well, keep in mind interest rates drop. They're a little bit higher than they are today than they were 3 weeks ago. And as we're going through, right, here's your interest rates. Here's your 3 months. And while they did dip really low, right, we got 1 week, right? We got a second week, we got a third week, and then they started going back up. So we are trending upwards. And so we just have to be cognizant of this and still know that there's mechanisms in place, right? Concessions are huge right now. So we have the ability, if the home is what checks the criteria for our buyers, and it is a question of what the monthly payment is, what number does it take to get in concessions from the seller to be able to buy down their rate? Is it a 3-2-1 buy down? Are we just paying discount points? Like, what are we doing to get them into a position? But let's look at 1 month even. I guess this really tells the story, right? I think if we're looking at this over 1 month, we've just gone up and up and up. And it really is because too many people are employed, too many people are making money. And so what happens in the Fed's eyes is that rates are so low that the cost of money is so cheap that people are just spending it. Really, that's what this is, right? The rates are going up because people believe that we are devaluing the dollar. Too many people have money and too many people are spending the money. So they're making the cost of money more expensive, so they stop spending it. Well, here's the thing. we were to look at a lot of this, people are not stopping going out to eat. I was really talking to one of our agents the other day, and they literally told me that they go out to eat every day. Every day they go out to eat. I know that we have some of the highest credit card debt that we've ever had. So this isn't even going to stop Amazon spending, right? Like it's on the credit card. We'll figure it out. I just have to make a monthly payment and we'll just go through and we'll continue to do it. They're going to keep giving me money. I'm going to keep taking it and I'll pay my minimum. That's a lot of the mentality that a lot of people have. So I don't think we've seen the higher interest rates curb anything. What it may have stopped is investors going out and buying more real estate. It may have stopped people from going out and starting new businesses, right? Because the cost of money is so high, and that's also what it impacts. We just think of it as real estate, though. We also know that we have the highest price tag item that most people deal with, right? As far as residential housing. And so we are disproportionately affected with these higher rates. And so we are going to see people pump the brake. And it will feel seasonal because of the weather. But it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with this thing going up. We thought we were going to live right here. We were so excited, right? Like this was looking good. We were pumped for it. We were like, we have been disproportionately affected with these higher rates. And now we're getting to a point where we can go do our job. And yet, in all reality, this is where we've been for a month with it just rising. And yet again, we do have mechanisms to get these dropped lower, right? Like we could take this 6.4 and we could get it down to a 5.4. We have mechanisms for that. We absolutely do. But yet, do we have the vendor partners that are educating us? Like, do you know what your vendor partners have as a ability to make the homes more affordable for people? And then obviously let's jump into Arvada real quick because the brokerage is in Arvada. And so the median list price, 749, right? So here we were. We were just talking at the beginning of this for the nation, right? Here's the nation. As far as 2024, the US median or not household income, but we're looking at this $85,000. We're looking at median household income versus that you're qualified. We're talking about just the affordability of a house. So when we're talking about this in the beginning, and we're saying that someone to have qualified income, they need $120,000. That's your 30%, right? You need to make $120,000, and we're at $749,000 right now. Is the median list price in Arvada? Your median list price of new homes, 645,000. Your square footage, 315. So we are seeing some dips. It is going down. But what isn't going down? Your average days on market. Guys, these are overpriced homes. But if we were to look at this and we were to get rid of all the outliers, 49. So we're talking a little bit over a month, almost a month and a half is what it's taking to sell a home that is priced right, at least in Arvada. If your home's priced wrong, we're talking north of 2 months. These are the conversations. What is it that is making you want to sell your home? What is the motivation? When do you want to be there? And we can point to this data. If it takes us 2.5 months to sell your house, and we know that we're probably going to take a price cut because 60% of all homes are taking a price cut after sitting on the market for 73 days, does it make sense to price your home right now to get it sold, to get you to your new location, to get you to start that new chapter of your life? These are the conversations we need to be having. You go through your price decreases, again, 60%. We are overpricing homes. Price increases, 1%. Guys, this is phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 of new builds. This is saying to me that they're not overly producing new homes, or if they are producing new homes, they're phase 2 and phase 3 are closer to the price of the first phases. All right, they're not increasing them hugely. Relisted houses, 8%. 8% of homes are falling out of contract in Arvada specifically. So we're going through, that tells me again, homes are overpriced. The cost of money is expensive. Buyers are pumping the brakes. They're saying, well, hey, you know what? I'm not comfortable taking on this home with all of these issues with it. Inventory score, they're giving it a 290. You're seeing your median rent at $2,800, and they're giving it a 41 score, saying that, yes, we're still in a seller's market, and it's actually pretty close to what it was last month, right? So like we're pretty much not a whole lot of change here. They're saying that this market's still a seller's market. We're getting pretty close to a balance, right? And the balance market truly is just saying inventory, more inventory. So the more inventory we have, the less buyers that we have, the more closer we get to a balanced market. And then we have more buyers, or I'm sorry, we have more sellers than inventory or than buyers at that point. That's when we start getting into a buyer's market. And so while we are shifting, there is obviously parts in the United States as well as in Colorado that are more towards a buyer's market than a seller's market. We just have to know where we're at so that we can actually make sure that we're educating our people.